Hi, everybody, and welcome to the COVID-19 Times Economy Seminar. I would like to welcome you today. We have Mr. Mark Thomas and Mr. Brent Rondon here, and I think we are going to get started. Brief introduction to Zoom. In the bottom left on computers and in the upper right on tablets, you can mute or unmute yourself. So please keep your microphone muted for when you're not speaking. But if we call on you to speak during the Q&A part of the seminar, we ask that you unmute yourself. Right next to the mute button, there should be a button that allows you to toggle your video on and off. We ask that you keep your video on. If you can't for any reason, it's fine, turn it off. But we ask that you keep it on so we can see your faces. And then for using the chat, which is how we will communicate with you during the Q&A part of the seminar, we ask that you can open the chat by clicking more, which is the three dots, and then there should be a chat button. You can click on that, it'll open up the chat. That's where you'll be putting your questions during the Q&A part of this seminar. And then there's also gallery mode and speaker view. That should be in the upper right or upper left, depending on your device. You can click on that to toggle between seeing just the person who is speaking or everybody in the seminar. So that's your choice on what you want to do with that. And then lastly, you can add an emotion by clicking on the reactions button along the bottom in a computer, or clicking three dots again reactions on a tablet. So so you may notice that we are recording today's seminar. So this video will not be shared with your video or identifying information. We really encourage you to speak out during the Q&A portion of the seminar and keep your video on. So there will be no recording of you or identifying information. Okay, so we're gonna start with some introductions. My name is Brendan White. I'm a rising sophomore at North Allegheny Intermediate High School, and I am joined today by Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm a rising junior at Baldwin High School here in Pittsburgh. Thank you all for joining. Today's seminar is part of a series of virtual events framed around the Building Back Better agenda. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted our profound connections through humanity while exposing us to the injustices that continue to live in our world and in Pittsburgh. Following the Council's established tradition in presenting innovative programs and activities on global issues, we are launching virtual events framed around the Building Back Better agenda. This international agenda was created to have a holistic approach to post-disaster recoveries. It encourages us to evaluate and rethink our society. Instead of rebuilding things the way they were before, we rebuild our systems to be more just, equitable, and resilient than before. Our goal for our public programs to be a platform for diverse audiences and speakers to come together. Today's specific seminar will focus on how COVID-19 has impacted our economy and how young people can be active in helping us build our economic systems back better.
So we are joined today by Mr. Mark Thomas, President of the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance, and Mr. Brent Rondon, the Senior Management Consultant for the Small Business Development Center, Institute for Entrepreneurial Excellence, Innovation Institute at the University of Pittsburgh. So our speakers today will share their perspectives as economic experts, and we hope that today's conversation will illuminate how COVID-19 is affecting our economy in Pittsburgh and around the world, and how we can work together to build our economic systems back better. So for more information, you can always check out the email that we sent prior to the seminar with some additional resources that you can read up on. So I'm going to hand it over to Sophia to introduce Mr. Thomas.
So thank you for participating in our icebreakers. Now we will be hearing from our speakers. Our first speaker is Mr. Thomas. He was appointed president of the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance effective in July 2019. He is responsible for creating and developing and executing the 10-county region's economic development strategy and advancing partnerships to drive job creation and business investment. He has nearly 2 decades of experience crafting and executing economic growth strategies and cross-sector collaboration for New York City, Los Angeles, and Atlanta. In 2016, he was selected by New York City's Economic Development Corporation, NYCEDC, to serve as its first senior vice president of partnerships, working to establish teams to foster and manage industry and international relationships and business attraction. He played a pivotal role in launching the city's $1.3 billion effort to catalyze 100,000 jobs in emerging industry sectors and further diversify the local economy. He's led efforts to partner with New York's international trade community to advance the city's global startup attraction. This approach was recognized as the top North American FDI strategy by FDI Intelligence magazine in 2019. Prior to NYCEDC, Mark served as the City of Los Angeles's inaugural Fuse Executive Fellow, leading efforts to make the city's neighborhoods more livable. He then served as director of the Mayor's Operation Innovation Team, a partnership between the Mayor's Office and the City of Los Angeles's for jobs and the economy to spearhead reforms of the city's procurement, real estate asset management, and risk management operations. Before entering the public sector, he worked in the media sector, shaping content and investigative journalism on social impact, economic development, and effective governance. Mark serves on the board of directors for the Power of 32 Site Development Fund, Fuse Corps, and the Camille A. Brown Dance Company. He is a graduate of MIT, Columbia University, and the University of Georgia. If you have any questions for Mr. Thomas while he is giving his presentation, please feel free to add those to the chat and we will address them during the Q&A portion of the seminar. Mr. Thomas, we turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. I'm super excited to be a part of this. I'll tell you first kind of what I do and why it's important for the broader Pittsburgh region. Then share a little bit about my narrative and what attracted me to do the type of work that I do, which seems to align with a lot of your own interests. And then share how COVID is going to change the Pittsburgh economy and why your voice is important. So first, if you've ever heard of the Allegheny Conference, it was established about 75 years ago. And the conference is really made up of the larger employers, the companies, the philanthropic organizations, and they basically pull their resources together to support the region's tough issues. And so that was established about 75 years ago. The Pittsburgh Regional Alliance was established roughly 2 decades ago to really work with businesses, investors, and others who are looking at different places they can create jobs. And what we do is try to advocate for why they should create those jobs here in Pittsburgh. I'm sure you all know the history of Pittsburgh regarding the steel collapse. And the last few decades, the region has really had to focus on reinventing itself to attract jobs. But we're not alone. Pretty much across the world, whether you're in New York, whether you're in Miami or San Francisco, I have counterparts that all advocate for their city who compete against Pittsburgh. I joined about a year ago. I was fascinated with economic development and issues around poverty and social impact when I was a teenager. When I was in high school, I wrote for my high school newspaper on these issues, went on to college and did this similar work, but for basically like the college town that I went to school in. That led to a career for me working in the communication space, kind of writing on these issues. And that lasted pretty much until about 2013. When I left New York City, I was actually a publisher of a magazine and I covered economic issues in New York. And as you can imagine, that's like exciting if you really care about helping people understand complex things and touching like millions of people regarding your work. After spending kind of years in that space, I actually wanted to be, I wanted to practice what I was writing about, practice what I was kind of bringing ideas on and become an actual person within the public sector. And so what she mentioned as far as my biography is when I actually went into government and worked in Los Angeles, and then most previously was back in New York City working on economic development issues there. So then coming to Pittsburgh, what attracted me to come to Pittsburgh is it is at the cusp of really becoming an exciting place where you see innovation. I'm sure a lot of you all see a lot of the tech companies that are here. A lot of that is driven by the university students and the high school kids. What companies see when they look at Pittsburgh from the outside in, we have 30 plus amazing schools, and there's like this war for people having the best talent they can find. And so as a result of that, the more companies that have discovered Pittsburgh have set up shop, and instead of recruiting those students away, which has historically been the case, they now can create an office here, and then those students can graduate and start to work within the Pittsburgh region. Now, obviously we have 10 counties that make up the region, and so that's not equitable. It's not equally distributed across all 10. And so that's where my job comes in, is to really help work with each of the counties, whether it's Greene, Westmoreland, Washington, Beaver, Allegheny, to really maximize how they can be well positioned for companies making investment and companies keeping talent and jobs in Pittsburgh. So obviously that's a big job, but it is exciting. And obviously with only 12 months in, there's a lot I still have to learn and still have to execute before you all really see the transformational work that we want to see. So in December, we had actually just published this big plan that mapped out what we wanted to make happen for the next decade. And when COVID hit, this is obviously not something that you ever really can plan for. Like the last major pandemic we had, you've heard reference to this, was the Spanish flu in 1918. And so we definitely were a different society back then. And so you never can really prepare for an entire economy shutting down. That said, when you do see that, it has definitely disproportionately impacted certain businesses, certain sectors, certain industries. I'm sure your families have been impacted by it as well. And so we're getting a sense of like, okay, if something like this happens again, if we do have some type of shock to the system, what are things we need to make sure we have in place so that we can be responsive and resilient and help people manage through the crisis and then start to recover? And so since this is kind of a real-time experiment, you're going to see some continued chaos as we try to figure out how we get it right. But after this experience, I think it gives us a template for how to do things better. To me, the only things that are comparable are when you see natural disasters, like New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Pretty much the city was shut down for months, and it took years to recover, and they still haven't recovered the same population. Or when you have like a major natural disaster, earthquake, or some type of social unrest, like having worked in Los Angeles after their social unrest in 1992, it took over 2 decades literally for the city to recover the same number of jobs it lost in 92. And so we're all learning how do you do this at a bigger scale than we've ever had to do before. And so in our case, with our plan, we were already looking at how do we make sure Pittsburgh attracts more investment, attracts more jobs, and not just jobs that go to the higher end, but jobs that are looking for diverse talent, that really want to invest in our communities, that want to create opportunities in our rural parts of the region and our urban parts, and then start to really transform the future. A lot of that thinking is still consistent with what has happened. And so if anything, it's further created an opportunity for us to be more aggressive. And the COVID has impacted the more dense cities more than it's impacted Pittsburgh. And that's going to have a negative effect on places like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, that have historically been the places where most of the jobs have been attracted over the last decade. And so it gives us a chance to really vie for Pittsburgh, position us to be more competitive in a way that we actually weren't as competitive a few years ago. What I want to show you now, and this is pretty much the way we want to talk about Pittsburgh as we start to really promote it. We started a whole process last year to rebrand how people think about Pittsburgh. We're moving away from the Steel City as our history, even though it's important, it's not necessarily relevant to people who have a lot of cool cities, whether they can move to Austin or Nashville. We think Pittsburgh is cooler than people give it credit for. And our communities are rich with culture, rich with a lot of just uniqueness that we want to make sure that when people are looking at places that they can live or places they can create jobs and hire our local people, that they really understand what Pittsburgh offers. And so this was actually launched last week, and it is like the first step of a new strategy to really represent what we think makes our place cool and attractive for investment. And so as we start to open our economy and recover, it gives us a better message that we can put out there to be more effective in what we do. And so that is my high level overview. I look forward to answering kind of any questions you all may have and in participating in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for your insightful remarks. I think it's really interesting how you're trying to transform the vision of the city into for greater economic impact. So next we're going to be hearing brief remarks from Mr. Brent Rondon. Brent G. Rondon is currently the Senior Management Consultant for the Small Business Development Center, Institute for Entrepreneurial Excellence, Innovation Institute at the University of Pittsburgh. In that capacity, he consults with export-import clients who want to engage in international trade, as well as immigrant entrepreneurs who are newcomers to the Pittsburgh region and want to open their own business. Previously, he was the manager of the Global Business Program at the Duquesne University Small Business Development Center. He managed a 5-year export project to assist U.S. equipment manufacturers to enter Latin American countries, resulting in $30 million in export sales of U.S.-made equipment. He has traveled extensively and led trade missions to countries such as Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, China, and Latin America. He received a master's degree of public and international affairs, a graduate certificate in Latin American studies from the University of Pittsburgh, and a bachelor's degree in agricultural engineering from La Molina University in Peru. He is a certified global business professional from NASBITE International. He is on the board of Global Pittsburgh, Mayor Peduto's Welcoming Pittsburgh Initiative, the Pittsburgh Metropolitan Area Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Sister Cities International, and the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust Diverse Communities Group. He is fluent in Spanish and intermediate Portuguese. He is married to Viviane, who is from Brazil and works for Covestro, and has 2 kids, Andre, who is 14, and Camila, who is 12, and they both attend South Fayette School District. And again, if you have any questions for Mr. Rondon or Mr. Thomas, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them in the Q&A section of the seminar. So Mr. Rondon, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm trying to share the screen now. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I want to thank the World Affairs Council for this invitation. My name is Brent Rondon. I come from Peru, South America, and I came to Pittsburgh as a graduate student many years ago at the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. Like Mark said, when I was a young fellow, I was very, very much interested about international affairs. Growing up in Latin America, we knew more about the United States than I think you guys know more about your country. And in fact, not only from the United States, but we knew more about what was happening in Europe or Asia or Africa, because that's a constant reality in Latin America. So I was so excited when I was here in the States, and then I graduated and I started working on international business. So I did exports, imports. I was involved in the NAFTA agreement many years ago between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And then I was involved in some foreign direct investment. So like you said, I met my wife here in Pittsburgh from all places, right? She's from Brazil. So what a Peruvian guy and a Brazilian lady are doing in Pittsburgh. And that's maybe the flavor sometimes you find in Pittsburgh, that you have pockets of population that are very much in the international scene. And that's how we met. And now Pittsburgh is our home. So I work for the University of Pittsburgh as a business center that provides consulting to small businesses. In my case, I focus on international business development, trying to help US companies to find customers overseas. So that's the exports component. We also help companies to do the imports side. Many manufacturing companies need foreign suppliers to bring goods into this country. So I help with that too. Not to a large extent, but I do some foreign direct investment when the questions come to my office. And then lately, I've been involved in the immigrant population. We have many immigrants coming from different countries, and they want to open a business. So that's where my office is helpful, trying to navigate the system. So I'm going to talk to you about now the U.S. exports, international business. So many people think international business is only for the big guys. But however, 97% of exporters are small businesses, and 2/3 have less than 20 employees. Now, the issue is that those exporters only export, the majority of them export to only one country. Okay, that's a problem, right? We have Canada is our #1 market, and Mexico our #2 market. So we have lots of work to do there. I put some examples of consumer-based products. This lady is a home-based business, and she cooks chocolate fudge. And she met some Japanese delegation, and they wanted her to export the chocolate fudge to Japan. And she said, why? This is just a basic chocolate fudge. And their answer was, because this is made in USA. And made in USA takes a quality perspective, and in this case, a flavor perspective. And the second example, this is a restaurant and a store that he got the chips and they dyed the chips. When they do that, he was exporting chips to Mexico. So that he found a niche to do that. In the industrial side, this is a local company who manufactures cleaning and testing equipment for heat exchanger and boilers and turbines for the petrochemical industry. And I took them to Peru to work and do business there. And in the case of Bone Tool, is a manufacturer of construction tools. And in this case, I attend the Catholic Mass in Spanish here in Pittsburgh. And I met the father of the kid. The kid was going to have heart surgery at our children's hospital. I met that father, and he was a salesman in Mexico of construction tools. So I took the person to the company, and Bone Tool, like the guy, now that guy is the representative of Bone Tool in Mexico, and not only Mexico, but the whole Latin America. This third example is a lady in Pittsburgh, has an autistic kid, and due to the autism, the kid has issues trying to get sleep. So she was looking for a solution to get some accessory in the market to help her with the kid. She couldn't find one. So she developed her own accessory, and nowadays she has more items. And she exports to the UK and Australia, and she has won the Export of the Year award in 2017. So opportunities are there. So there's a big market out there. 95% of the world customers live outside the United States. So there's a big opportunity, but we just need to unveil that for the small businesses. However, only 1% of all of US businesses export. So that's a big issue. That's a big area to grow. And I would invite all of you guys to think in the future to get involved in exporting. This is a map of all the states that have countries as their #1 market. So Pennsylvania state sells #1 to Canada, and we sell #2 to Mexico, which follows the US statistics. And we have there the list on Canada, Mexico, China, Japan, and the UK are the top 5 exporting countries for us. Now, in addition to that, the United States has free trade agreements with 20 countries. And when I say free trade, I mean no duties, no taxes. And that's an easy way to do both exports and imports. So we have Middle East countries, we have Latin American countries, we have Canada, and we have Asian countries. So this is a good strategy for them to do exports. Now, in the case of China, many US companies manufacture operations in China. And from there, they send their goods into the United States. But because of the trade war right now, we have a tariff war. any product that comes from China into the United States is subject to this extra tariff, extra tax. So the product is more expensive in the United States. So many US companies now are moving out of China. And we have a list of countries there. As you see, Vietnam is #1, Taiwan #2, Thailand #3. And just happens to be that Pittsburgh has a sister cities organization. So Pittsburgh has a sister city in Vietnam, sister city in Japan, and China from this list. So that's a good strategy also. Some companies take companies from China all the way to Mexico, because Mexico is in a unique situation south of the border. Now, Mexico, United States, and Canada signed their own special free trade agreement, which means no duties, no taxes for the three countries, unless you manufacture in any of the three countries. Now, the new agreement is called USMCA, used to be called a NAFTA agreement. USMCA is having some changes. They, for example, increase the content requirement for North America content from 62% to 75%, and also the labor laws, labor costs. In Mexico, a worker makes $2 per hour to make a car. Well, in a new agreement, they bumped up to pay them $16 per hour to build a car. If they do that, that becomes a North America content so that the good can come to the United States free of duty. COVID-19 has affected worldwide. It's a tragedy. I am from Peru. In Peru, they shut down the country. It's in the 10th position right now as a country with the number of deaths. Unemployment in this case in the United States is very high. It's more than what we had at the Great Depression. I was just reading worldwide, we hit now 15 million people affected with COVID and over 616,000 dead people. So it's really affecting our supply chains. Remember, we live in a global world and the supply chain disruptions are happening. So you see in this chart, the light blue bars. Right now, some countries are showing some signs of recovering, like China just showed a 3% growth in their economy. So that might be something that we could take advantage of, but it's still a big challenge. Now, industries that have been hit the hardest, of course, we know the restaurants and barbershops and gyms and hotels, but you also have universities. You have the shopping malls, Macy's and JCPenney's, some of them fighting for bankruptcy, manufacturing operations being affected with the supply chain. Now you have winners and losers, right? So who is winning are the logistics companies, or the Uber Eats, the Grab Hubs, FedEx, or the masks manufacturers, pet stores. The number of families adopting pets is going in record numbers now. Zoom, or we have Numo. Numo is a fintech company from PNC Bank, and it's an app for financial applications. So all the digital space is growing. So that could be one area that you guys can focus more as you try to find ways to help the community. Of course, education. As more educated, less you will be affected by COVID-19. The same happened in depression. So I will encourage you to continue your education. This slide shows the federal, state, and the city resources to help small businesses. So my center is one of the centers that we help companies to get the money. This is a project in our Pittsburgh International Airport. It's called a Neighborhood 91. So they are trying to create a cluster of 3D printing companies and additive manufacturing companies all in one place. So they're trying to get a supply chain in one place so we can have a hub of these industries. So this is a lot of interest happening. There's an Australian delegation is coming. They say it's coming next year, interested in the project. So hopefully something will happen in our airport. And this is the last slide. I wanted you to take some action. Is a Pittsburgh Immigrant Business Directory project. So we're in the beginning stage of forming an immigrant business directory in Pittsburgh. We want to highlight the contributions of immigrants into this area. Of course, we have Luis Von An from Duolingo. He came to Pittsburgh as a student at Carnegie Mellon University from Guatemala. And later he found some companies, he sold them to Google, became a millionaire. Now he's with Duolingo, over 300 million users. So the guy is in Pittsburgh, and he chose to stay here because he likes the environment. And we want that, okay? We want people to come to Pittsburgh, stay in Pittsburgh. Now we have the newcomers too. The newcomers could be engineers, medical doctors, but they are not doing that activity in Pittsburgh. They are maybe Uber drivers or working in restaurants, but some of them decide to open a business. So my office has been very diligently helping these immigrants to open businesses. Whatever business you have is okay. We want to create an ecosystem of international contacts in Pittsburgh. So this immigrant business directory I think will help them to be more visible. So I would like is you as a group of youth, if you want to help us out with the immigrant business directory, you can email me and we can talk more about it, okay? So this is my last slide. This is my contact information. I work at the Innovation Institute at the University of Pittsburgh, and we're very happy to be here, myself, my family, and all my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you for that very informative presentation, Mr. Rondon. I really enjoyed how you focused on international affairs because it shows how truly interconnected we all are, as this pandemic also showed. So at this point, we'd like to move on to our panel discussion. We want to continue this conversation with Mr. Thomas and Mr. Rondon, and we invite all of you to add your questions to the chat. We want to hear your voice, so if we call on you to ask your question, please turn on your mic and ask your question to the speaker. If you aren't able to access your mic or you'd prefer not to ask your question aloud, please note that in the chat and we would ask the question on your behalf.
Okay, so I'll start off with the first question. So Mr. Thomas and Mr. Rondon, could you each briefly, in like 2 to 3 sentences, tell us what you think the biggest economic challenge the United States will have to face over the next 6 to 12 months?
I'll go first. I think it's consumer confidence. So much of our economy is driven by consumerism that until people travel, start buying, investing, and taking risks, it will mute the overall recovery.
Yeah, I think also that the digital space, many small businesses, believe it or not, they are not too active in the digital space. So that would be an area that we will need to focus to save some of these businesses in these next 5 years or so.
Okay, so I'm gonna call on Ben Quinn if he could ask his question that he put into the chat.
Okay, so my question is, I'm going to open up to both the speakers, seeing as how you both talked about people coming into the city. So how does negative population growth in the city affect the appeal of businesses trying to come in and create jobs here? And how are we searching for both more people and more jobs?
Oh, no, it is the biggest problem that we face. And I'll just speak to the perception. The Midwestern states, we're not even officially a Midwestern state, but our culture is Midwestern, are perceived as lower growth areas. And so when we're talking to companies, if they look at the aggregate number, they're going to see a decline. A lot of that is not necessarily driven by the center part of the region, but the aggregate shows declining numbers, and we project that will continue. To change that, we actually have to attract more diversity, more immigrant population, or else we'll continue to lose people. Where there is a positive sign is our actual millennial population and the younger demographic that make up the workforce. That's actually growing. And so what we try to do is really showcase to people that the talent that we have here, the actual amount of students that are trained here and then leave is kind of like a lost number, that it gives people access to people that they don't realize are reflected within our overall population number.
Yeah, and also the role of partnerships. We're close to Cleveland, Ohio, but we're close to Erie or close to, Morgantown, West Virginia. So if we look at ourselves as a region, and we have so many universities, right, in that group. So, and we have so many international students coming. And in my job, sometimes I connect the international students' background because we ask if the family back in their country is in business. And if they're in the steel industry or they're in the medical industry, we sometimes ask if they would like to introduce us to that contact. And some students are happy to do that. And we have been doing that very timid, trying to connect. But there's a resource we have. They come from all over the world, all the way to Pittsburgh. And then after they graduate, we hope they stay. But if they go back, they will be our ambassadors, right? They will be our reps. Like this guy from Mexico who came with a kid that had an operation at a children's hospital. Now he's a representative of this Pittsburgh company in Mexico. So I think we have to develop these innovative, out-of-the-box ideas and connect more human to human. I guess that could be helping our whole entire region.
So Ariana has a good question about unemployment rates, and I will ask it for her because her mic doesn't work. So she asks, how long do you believe it'll take for unemployment rates to decrease to the rates they were previously during the end of Obama's administration and the beginning of Trump's? Do you believe this administration dealt with unemployment and the implementation of stimulus checks as well as they could have?
So there are a couple questions in that. So we don't actually, I'll just say this, I don't think we know. So we've seen different projections that I've seen some as extreme as a decade. I've seen others as short as 2 to 3 years. And I think it's somewhere between that is when we'll get back to the record levels of unemployment that we had. And so I think what you have to remember is we were actually in a place, at least as far as employment figures, that we really hadn't been in ever as a country. And that was really across every demographic. And that said, it's going to take a while to get us back to that if the new economic normal or global trade and all those things have some consistency from where they were before. It's hard for me to know, though, on whether the stimulus checks and that strategy was the right strategy. I do think broadly, and I mentioned this in my intro, we don't have a lot of the same safety systems that you see in other countries. And this is one of the first times where it seemed to really touch a lot of people at scale. And so conversations that you hear around universal basic income or universal health care will be active conversations that will play themselves out in our policy conversations, because we were in a place where there was no safety net and millions of people lost jobs rapidly, and the government had to respond pretty quickly.
Yeah, in my case, we have two groups. One is the small, very, very small businesses who complain that the amount of assistance given to the employees and all the unemployment checks they're getting makes them to stay home. And they prefer to do that instead to come back to the business. So that's one scenario. Okay, so they're having issues with that. The next group of companies received enough amount of money on the CARES Act that they kept employees. And even though they were not working, but they were still got paid. So now that we see a little bit of recovery, some employees are coming back to work. But still the issue is many of the employees don't want to come back to work because of the situation. They are afraid that they will get infected. And then they can choose not to work anymore for a company and instead apply for unemployment. And unemployment is very generous right now. So they stay there, and the poor companies are suffering because they need workers. So that what Mark said, consumer confidence. Okay, confidence is going to be the number one issue in all these situations, even for school openings, right? I don't know about your schools, but my kids' school, they are grappling with ideas either to go in real person live or do online school. So yeah, and the universal basic income or health, yeah, I agree, that will become a major topic of conversation coming up.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask Tabo to unmute herself next, and if you could introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Tabo, and I live in the Pittsburgh region. My question was, how do you think places with tourism-based economies can bounce back from the pandemic, / do you think they can in a significant way? And if not, what do you think needs to happen to support them?
Well, I'll go first. So I will say that's going to take them a while. Like there's just no way that, like the unfortunate thing about where we are now is there's kind of no quick fixes for a lot of the problems. And so coming from New York City, which survives so much on international tourists supporting, I think over 200,000 businesses, what I've seen. Like you imagine every aspect in the supply chain that's tied to all the major entities like Broadway, hotels. My dog's happy. Are all going to be impacted as long as we're in a place without a vaccine. And so I think why you see the urgency, and it's actually exciting to watch the life sciences community try to get to a vaccine, is until that happens, like consumer confidence would never be at a place that people will freely travel and start to rebuild. What I have seen people really pivot to is assuming that we will unfortunately lose a lot of businesses. The caveat is people who have an entrepreneurial spirit will want to create their next version of whatever they had before. And so to me, I think where governments have a great opportunity is to make sure they have like rapid permitting, make it as easy as possible for the restaurant that closes, for the new idea to be born quickly and get back up and running. And so I hope that they start pivoting and thinking through how do we put systems in place that don't delay what is a recovery that would need to take place.
Yeah, my 2 cents here is the face of tourism will change more in the going to open spaces or nature or the countryside or outside of the city instead to go to enclosed places. So I think that would be a shift, and in this case, Pennsylvania is rich with natural resources and tourism opportunities. So I think we'll see that big shift from traditional going to museums or enclosed places to big open nature spaces.
We have time for one more question. So we asked for a 30-second response to Samantha's question. So Samantha, could you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm from the Pittsburgh area. Thank you so much for being here. And I was just going to ask, what do you think about the belief that reopening states and possibly endangering lives will be worth it to save the economy? How will rapid reopening affect the economy compared to a shutdown?
Yeah, I tend to be on the more saving lives side. And I think what we're seeing today, unfortunately, I think will be consistent until we get to a vaccine, where you're going to have pieces that open up and then we have to shut them back down. And we have places that may thrive for a while and then may not have an outbreak. And then some of the more dense places will just have to stay more in preventative mode until we have a vaccine. So I think the unevenness and the conversation around what is the right thing will be consistent for a while.
Yeah, you might say, I agree, going more for the safe side. But in the United States, if you compare United States with other countries, the degree of people having refrigerators at home, for example, we're almost 100%. Many countries are 40% have refrigerators, which means what? Means that they have to live day by day and they have to go and buy food every day. Now, work. We have a formal economy in the United States. in other countries is an informal economy, meaning they don't have a stable job. They have to look for a job every day. And also the banking system. How many people have a checking account in the United States versus overseas? Overseas, only 30% of people have checking accounts in some countries. So, so we are lucky in a way because looking from overseas, we have all this infrastructure, all these programs. So hopefully this virus will leave soon, or will be cured, so we can all start our lives again. Yeah.
Thank you to Mr. Thomas and Mr. Rondon for joining us, and thank you to all our participants for asking questions. I'm sure we will all leave feeling more informed about this topic. At the end of the seminar, we want to close with an activity about the digital tools you can use to take action and raise your voice as we work together to build back better. So today's activity will be about how to use alternative story formats for advocacy. So Brendan will be facilitating that.
Okay, let me get my screen shared real quick. Okay, can you guys see that? Okay, so today we're going to be talking about how to use alternative story formats to use your digital voice and spread your advocacy message. So an alternative story format is essentially just, let me make that full screen. There's a short communication tool that is different from your traditional news story. So it often involves graphics and short blurbs of information that makes it a lot more engaging and a lot quicker to read than your regular news story. So we're going to be looking at 7 different examples of some alternative story formats that you can use instead of a regular article while getting your message out there. So the first one is Q&A, and this is really good if you have access to experts who can do a Q&A with you. So the idea of this is pretty simple. You have your questions and you have an expert or experts on the topic answer your questions that you have. This is really good for like in advance of an event or just a quick update on a situation. So this is a really good one if you want to get a lot of information across quickly and if you would like to quote the experts that you are using directly. Okay, so our second type is a list. So this can be in the form of like top 10 things that you can do to help a certain cause, with a checklist that's like things you should do to help this, or things you didn't know about, for in this example, the census. So this works really well if you have just like short little blurbs of information and then have some nice illustrations, and it can be really factual and really informing, but it can also really help get across your point in a fun way. Another format you can use to get your point across is quizzes. And I'm sure everybody knows what these are, whether you've done one on BuzzFeed. And just, you can use the information that you have from an article or that you want the readers to learn and put them in a question format and then give the right answers at the end, maybe an explanation that helps the reader to learn about the topic in a fun way that's different from a news article. So another way is a more serious game. So this is actually an example of what iGeneration Youth did. And what they did is they created the article that we saw in the previous slide into a game to help you learn about it. And again, so this is good because it has the value of education, but it's also entertaining. So people can play through it and have fun while doing it, but also it can learn. But also you can learn from playing it. Another method you have is called photo tales, and this is the idea of presenting a story through photography and short captions, and I believe iGeneration Youth limits it to 50 words on their photo stories. So this is really good because you can have a picture and a short description so people know what they're looking at, and it can really tell an impactful story even if you don't consider yourself a writer. It can be a really good method if you enjoy photography. I know a lot of students do. Another option similar to photography is comics journalism. So if you're a really good artist and you enjoy creating art and you have a topic you're passionate about, you can create little comics that tell a fun story, but also provide information about the topic that you want to inform about. And so on the left here, we have an example of like a spread in a magazine or newspaper. But you can also do it on the right here with each individual image and post it to Instagram, for example, and have like the viewers scroll through and read each individual slide. And so the last one we're going to look at is just thinking outside the box and different eye-grabbing, attention-getting ways to present your information. So this is one about Black Lives Matter. And on the left, there's some examples of what they would post in an Instagram feed. On the right, there's what they would post on an Instagram story. And it's really different from a regular news article. It doesn't look like a regular news article, but it's still getting the point across and using social media for advocacy. So you can use any of these different methods on social media, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. And it's just a good way to present your information in an engaging form and get your point across in a way that isn't a regular news article. So I would like to thank you for joining our seminar today. And we hope that you'll join us next week for our conversation on how COVID-19 has impacted the education system and how young people can be active participants in building back our education system better. So for more information on the upcoming seminar, the Using Your Digital Voice to Build Back Better workshop, and all of the Emerging Global Leader seminars, just visit the website tinyurl.com/2020EGLS, and I believe that is also in the chat, so you can check out the link there. We look forward to seeing you next time. We thank you for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.